We're in a sensitive zone here. The people learn to protect themselves from nature's fury, but now it's taking on very disquieting proportions.
With regard to Walter Jones, everyone plays the victim. But some people didn't refrain from trying to make him fall from his perch.
I'm not the one who started this procedure, Inspector. It is Hubert de Noland who suggested this to Billy and me. I acknowledge that I supported and signed this procedure, but please understand me. Noland saw my grandfather often, which was not the case with me. I thought he was telling the truth about my grandfather turning senile.
Well, if you had thought you would inherit, it seems to me that this is in a little danger.
I didn't have any illusions about my grandfather for a long time, Mr. Norm. And this repugnant letter only reinforces my convictions. Walter Jones is good and proper, one of the biggest jerks I know.
What did you get in return for rescinding that Walter Jones be put under psychiatric care?
Listen, Mr. Norm, I don't want to tell you tales. It was a give and take between us. My grandfather was rewriting his will in our favor, something which is utterly normal and which happens in every family in the world, I'll allow myself to remind you, in exchange for which Billy and I accepted to sign this paper. My grandfather manipulated us one more time. He took us for a big ride. In my view, we'll get nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Why did Jones speak of your desire for revenge against him?
Mr. Norm, I will never forget, you hear me, never, that day. The day when I was able to restore some dignity to my father, who was humiliated by this jerk Walter Jones. And if I'd had a shorter temper, I would have killed my grandfather that day. It was everything he deserved. Yes, I would have so liked to kill Walter Jones.
Did Walter Jones wear this chain around his neck?
I wouldn't stake my life on it, but this chain looks very much like the one my grandfather had.
This family photo is very touching. I imagine that you learned to shoot because you have a gun in your hands?
My God, you're bringing back memories, Inspector. I had forgotten this. It was nevertheless marvelous. My grandfather took us to a hunting reserve in Tanzania. There, Walter Jones was like a child. Yes, it's one of the best memories I will keep of him. His childlike laughter during the safari.
I'm told that an accident left Baina mute. What is that about?
I only know that my grandfather fell with Baina from a place on the island, and that they both came out of it rather badly. I don't know the reasons and circumstances, and I prefer not to know.
If Noland is to be believed, the young Baina literally cast a spell on Walter Jones. What do you know about this?
Mr. Norm, I don't have any illusions about my grandfather's morality, and Baina is far from being stupid. She knows that Walter Jones is a very rich man, and I believe she's very capable of using her charms with some talent.
What reasons could Billy have had for hating his grandfather?
For hating him? Plenty. For killing him? If that's where you want to go, none. Walter Jones never liked the side of him that was irresponsible and gambled, and he told him more than once. Billy is sometimes in dire financial straits, and our grandfather never helped him. That's why they didn't get along. But I'll tell you again, my brother is a peach and would never hurt a soul.
So, tell me a little about Billy.
I love my brother, Inspector, but he worries me sometimes. He loves to gamble too much, and I'm afraid that he's throwing his career to the wind because of this.
What do you think of Christina?
Christina's body is an asset. I suppose it hasn't escaped you, Inspector. And she knows perfectly well how to make the most of what nature has given her. She seduces with the same ease with which others breathe.
I would like to know more about Martin.
Martin is my husband, and I'm happy with him, Inspector. All is said, or almost. I admire my husband, and I admire his professional courage. It's not a secret. Martin has financial problems with his publishing firm, but I am by his side.
What can you tell me about Marco?
Marco is my darling younger brother, Inspector. What else can I tell you? I will always be there for him, no matter what happens.
What can you tell me about Clara?
I like my sister-in-law very much, Inspector. Clara reminds me of my grandmother, Anna Jones. The same kindness.
Do you know if Walter Jones was wearing something around his neck on the night of his death?
Yes, I remember that my grandfather wore a small chain. I am certain, Mr. Norm.
Do you know who in this tower knows how to use a gun?
I saw Lorenzo Battiglieri use a rifle on gulls. It was a long time ago, but I don't think he has lost his dexterity, even if he is loaded with antidepressants.
Did you see anyone in the library the evening of the murder?
Why this question, Mr. Norm, since you already know? I was not in the library before or during the murder of my grandfather.
I get it. Well, all this is very touching.
Correct match.
I will certainly be able to use this for something. Long live the old-fashioned methods. I must take your fingerprints for the investigation.
My fingerprints? Because you seriously think I'm a murderer, Inspector?
Thanks. At present, no more laughing. I am the representative of judicial authority on this island, and I have a murder on my hands. Sorry, but I understand nothing about architecture. I would like to have some things in this sketchbook explained.
I don't know anything about it, Inspector. Ask the architect. In my view, he's the only one who can enlighten you.
What did Walter Jones tell you regarding his estate?
Walter Jones completely changed his attitude with his grandchildren. He wanted to bequeath them all his money. Well, so much the better. But after all the terrible things he did to them, it's a little late.
The autopsy is categorical. Walter Jones died from a bullet wound in his back, and not as a result of his fall from the Tortoise Belvedere. With all the doubts stemming from the circumstances, Baena has nothing to do with the death. Nevertheless, I would love to have your point of view on this.
I don't know, Baena, but I have a good instinct about these people. And frankly, I don't see her scheming something so horrific. But I am a little lost with all this, Inspector.
What were you doing at the hour of the crime, around 11 p.m.?
I was at the restaurant from 9:45 p.m. to 11 p.m. I cleared the table with Sonia, I washed the dishes, and cleaned up. If you must know, I'm fed up with being their maid. I had a fight with Billy because he was playing poker. It's crazy. He keeps on playing as if he didn't kick up enough trouble in my life and in my father's, too, with his gambling debts. It drives me nuts, but he just doesn't listen. After that, the maid prepared food for the next day. That was my evening, Inspector.
With regard to Walter Jones, everyone plays the victim. But some people didn't refrain from trying to make him fall from his perch.
I won't pretend to be indignant with you, Inspector. Jones did everything he could to push his grandchildren down this route. He deserved it, that old shark. Believe me.
What did you get in return for rescinding that Walter Jones be put under psychiatric care?
You ought to speak to Billy, Inspector. I don't get mixed up with the family affairs of my husband.
What is the connection between Walter Jones and your father's consulting firm?
You're certainly well informed, Inspector. Walter Jones is responsible for the collapse of my father's consulting firm. The jerk didn't want to help Billy, who was in danger of being finished off by the Russian mafia because of some gambling debts. The old man wouldn't lift a finger, and it was my father who absorbed Billy's debts. He did it for me, of course, but he counted on Billy repaying him in the shortest possible time. Well, obviously, Billy wasn't able to reimburse him. That put my father's business in difficulty. The poor man had a heart attack, and in fact, he almost died, you know. He's still not out of that mess. And guess what? The Jones Company is in line to buy my father's firm. I dreamed of strangling Jones, Inspector. Yes, I really dreamed it.
I get the impression that Walter Jones was not very affectionate with you.
Walter Jones knew that my father's health was poor after the payment of his consulting office was stopped, and he didn't do anything about it, even though he was a self-made man just like my father. He could have tried to understand that for my father all would be lost, especially because this was all because of Billy, Inspector. Yes, Jones was a monster, a cruel and heartless man.
All this seems to indicate that Billy got himself in a real soup, and his family with him. What do you think?
It is, above all, Walter Jones who got us into that soup, Inspector. That old jackal was in no position to give lessons in morality, believe me. It was he who never wanted to absorb the debts of my husband. Walter Jones, one of the richest men in the world, didn't let go of a cent for his grandson.
I didn't think Jones was such a jerk. And his accomplice, Nolan, doesn't seem to be much better.
As far as I'm concerned, Walter Jones can burn in hell, Inspector. And Nolan deserves no better. He's the one who advised his boss to let my father's consulting firm collapse to pieces so that they could buy it at a throwaway price.
Did Walter Jones wear this chain around his neck?
This is a man's chain. It reminds me of something, but I really don't know what.
See you later.